So, hey, everyone, I know there's a few people still joining, but I'm going to be respectful of everyone's time. We'll go ahead and get this kicked off. Really excited to hear from our speaker this evening. So, hey, welcome everyone again to our April Charlotte Metro ISC2 chapter meeting. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy evening to spend some time with us. We hope that you will gain a lot of great information from our speaker tonight. So we're really looking forward to that. Just to give you guys another update, as we've mentioned in our previous meetings, we are still in the chartering process. The formal window for ISC2 for all of the charters in North America closes out today. So they should be reviewing all of the documentation that we have uploaded and validating all our milestones and the information that we provided for them. And we should be well on our way to formally becoming an official chapter here soon. I'll be following up with Paula from ISC2, who's responsible for the North America chapters, just to make sure that we continue to be on track. So I just want to thank the folks that have been involved previously with all the help that you guys have been doing. It's really been great, and it's been a great team effort. So just want to personally thank you guys. With that, I'll turn it over to Matt to introduce our sponsor and our speaker.
Appreciate it, Sean. Welcome, guys. Good to see you again. It's been a couple months. We're making some great progress, as Sean shared, and looking forward to the road ahead. We've got some good speakers lined up, some good sponsors, lots of good action items to tackle as a group, and believe there's going to be a great turnout. Hopefully, we all can either choose to get vaccinated or not vaccinated to get back in person at some point. Hopefully this summer, maybe by the fall. It just depends. As Sean mentioned before, we're trying to do some offline things as small groups, but inching back into post-COVID era normalcy, whatever that means. But doing the best that we can. So just as a brief introduction, I want to introduce our sponsor. I've known this group for quite a long time. I think real highly of what they do, the quality of work that they provide, both in the commercial and government cybersecurity space. Before I introduce the COO of the company, just a quick overview of Fortalice Solutions. They provide a personalized end-to-end service built on a proven methodology that integrates offensive security engineering, risk and compliance, and strategic communications. In times of crisis, their incident response and open source intelligence teams can swiftly handle an incident from triage to remediation. They've got a really strong team. CEO and founder of the organization, Teresa Payton, has been at the helm since inception and has been one of the pillars in the community on a national level for quite some time. And she's been great in the community locally as well. I want to introduce Bridget O'Connor. She's the COO. She was probably employee number 2, maybe number 3. I don't know the exact jersey number that she wears, but I think I'm close. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It was a number 1.
Oh, okay. Well, he's even better.
Jeez, Matt.
There you go. Inception to reality was the first employee. So there you go. I'm gonna stop talking and introduce her.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to give a special thank you to Matt and CyberSN, as well as ISC2 here in the Charlotte metro area. And Sean, thank you very much for having us. Very excited to talk to you tonight about, obviously, our main topic. Our director, Chris Furtick, will be taking that part. But I wanted to take the time to talk to you a little bit about Fortalice Solutions, our approach, where we come from, why we think we're somewhat different in the space, and hopefully tell you a few things about us. So if you could go ahead, Chris. We're really proud of the fact that, especially in cyber today, we are a privately held, privately funded firm, completely bootstrapped. Our CEO is our only owner in the company. And so for the 3rd or 4th year in a row, we've been nominated by Cybercrime Magazine as the Hot 150 cybersecurity companies to watch. Steve Morgan, we work very closely with, helping some of his clients who need pro bono work, which is also a passion project for Fortalice. We do a lot of work for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in our free time. And he wanted to highlight that he finds us to be the cybercrime fighters that he are so passionate, I think, in the world today, in our world, that are needed. And that's really where we focus. And we all kind of embrace, you see our shield up there, kind of the superhero mentality that we work on. Next slide, please. So if you go to our website, you won't see a bunch of logos or clients that we've worked for. And why that's unique is we also have a Washington, D.C. presence, as Matt was saying. We do work in the federal government space. And we don't name our clients. Obviously, we're professional secret keepers, is what we like to tell our clients. Most of us hold top secret clearances in the federal space. We actually have a facility clearance. Most of our work is commercial, but we were built on federal contracts, and that will never go away. We are very much dedicated to helping the country whatever way we can. And usually that's providing very high level red teaming or pen testing services in the federal or state and local space. And really, when we talk about our vision, if you could go back, sorry, Chris, I think thank you. We really focus on, as Matt was saying, kind of high touch, what we call our white glove service, really from end to end. When a client calls and they're in need of something, we hate to say no. If we can't do it though, we can't do it well, we will refer them to a partner, but we take that very seriously in terms of who we refer folks to. Our team, really, they're all experts. We don't hire too many junior folks. We're starting to, just for succession purposes, but in reality, the majority of our team are SMEs in their respected areas. And that's what our clients have come to expect in terms of what we offer. Next. So I already kind of, hit on some of these, but we are a nationally certified woman-owned small business, top secret security clearance. We're known for our industry-leading red teaming capability, as well as our incident response and digital forensics team. Locations in Northern Virginia, Maryland, DC, Charlotte, but also in the UK, which we're very excited about. Our UK team is very interesting in that they focus mostly on the OSINT, open source intelligence training for a lot of law enforcement organizations, but also now we're expanding to being able to do that training for SOCs. We found that that's been very useful, kind of an exciting added bonus too for some of our clients who want to reward some of their hardworking SOC staff. Next. So Teresa is our president and our CEO. So we're founded in 2014. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with her. If you listen to Bo's radio show, she's on there a lot. She does a lot in the Charlotte area, obviously, but she's also nationally recognized as a cyber expert, frequently on CNN, Fox News, etc. Really, her passion is getting education out there about cyber. She never wants to blame the user. It is always about whether or not they were trained and how can we do better by them. So the Fortalice team, so again, I kind of hit on this, but we do have an impressive background. I actually met Teresa. She and I worked at the White House together in the Bush administration. She was actually the first female CIO. I recruited her for the job. Funny enough, she thought it was a prank phone call, wouldn't take the call at first. It put me on hold for about 10 minutes. And then I said, no, really? She said, well, your phone number doesn't show up. I said, yeah, it's blocked. It's an unknown number, sorry. So she eventually decided to come and interview. And really her dedication was she never left Charlotte. She commuted up here and spent Mondays through Thursdays here in DC at a hotel, and then would drive back to Charlotte to spend with her family. But that's just some of the background. We also have obviously a lot of folks from the government background, NSA, DOD, Army Signal Intelligence for some of our OSINT team, as well as a lot of folks from banking and some of the other big four consulting firms. So one of the things that's kind of interesting is we'll talk to some of our competitors, and they usually, they really segment into certain sectors. Fortalice does not. We're all over the place. We'd rather offer our services to anybody really who's in need. But because of our Charlotte origins, the majority of our clients are obviously even in the financial sector, ranging from mid-sized to large banks, but also many credit unions, as well as some of the smaller local sized banks. We're expanding greatly in retail as of late, particularly in the food industry, and we do a lot of work in energy and critical manufacturing. So this is really just a breakdown, and I'm not going to spend too much time here, but this encapsulates all of the services that Fortalice provides. And as you can see there's six main pillars. Obviously, offensive ops, which is our mainstay. What I think is a little bit different about our approach to red teaming is we're not your, okay, I need an annual, vuln scan. That's not Fortalice. This is much more for typically more mature organizations who are really trying to test their defenses or are really interested in learning and teaching, working alongside our red team. And that's why we offer purple teaming. We have a specialty area in IoT and device testing, which is very interesting and kind of up and coming. And then we obviously provide all the blue teaming network defense services across the board, including fractional or virtual CISO. Our main key here is we have just launched a new service offering related to our threat hunting capability and incident response. So everything proactive and reactive, although we more, as Chris will get into, we want to meet you in a proactive manner, not in a reactive manner. We find that obviously to be the most beneficial, obviously to customers, but also our opportunity to teach, preventative skills when it comes to an incident response. So we'll do everything there from response to a tabletop exercise to develop your plan. Our cyber risk, name your framework, we do it. We can provide end-to-end development of policies, give you a complete cyber risk assessment, do a gap analysis. Our main focus recently, because we are in the government space, as are many of our clients, is CMMC. So we've been doing a lot of work in that area in terms of getting folks ready, even though the government in typical fashion has again changed their requirements of who falls into what category. So that's going to be a real learning experience over the next 2 years or so. Within that realm, we provide merger and acquisition advisory services for a lot of our clients who are obviously going through acquisitions. They want to make sure everything from a cyber and technical security perspective are A-OK, and that's where they bring us in. OSINT. So this is one of my favorite areas of Fortalice, in that I think it provides the most value on a personal level to a lot of folks. And we offer what we call our digital bodyguard services, where really from end to end, from your home to your digital footprint online to constant monitoring or continual monitoring, we can really we attempt to keep you as safe as possible online. We also do a lot of work in terms of takeovers of accounts. So Instagram, Facebook, social media, we all have contacts there to assist when accounts are taken over. Our clients there are obviously very interesting. It's usually high net worth individuals, actors, actresses, sports figures. So it really does lend kind of an interesting flair to the work. And then everything I mentioned, we do for the federal government. The only one item that we really do more for the government is in strategic communications. Much of our work is with the Department of Homeland Security, even though we're working to expand that greatly, but that's the majority of our past performance within the federal space. And again, this is just our representative set of clients. Some folks will come to Fortalice and say, oh, some of your main competitors are Mandiant or Deloitte or PwC. How do you possibly compete with them? But in all reality, we have clients ranging from Fortune 500 to Fortune 50. We're all very proud of it. We will still always help the small business. We are a small business, and we know that they often are lacking the resources that they need to help make them secure. But we're very proud of our representative set of clients here, as they span really all industries, and as well as the federal, state, and local space. And that is it. I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Furtick. Matt wants to do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in real quick before we introduce Chris. What about specifically is driving more of a demand for your services? Is there something happening in that industry as a whole that you could speak to that's
Yep.
qualifying that, or is it just more about relationships that have been built over time that's drawing the attention?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great question. So the majority of our clients, honestly, are referrals from past clients, right? Teresa has built Fortalice on obviously her name, her reputation. But in the last 2 or 3 years, what we've really attempted to do is drive that based on referrals from past clients. You don't see a lot of marketing from us. That's really intentional. We're not that we're picky at all about who we help, but really we're looking for a certain client in term where we can really make an impact. We're not interested in, kind of staying with them for years and years. We want to be able to leave them and leave them better than we found them. I think what's driving it, which is interesting, was last year, obviously during COVID, was the move to remote work. We also had many incidents, a lot of IRs, a lot of odd things happening on folks' networks, and that was picking up a lot of calls to Chris. Fortunately, some of them were more, non-events. We did see that, and there's definitely more of a move, I think, to the cloud, obviously, and cloud security still remains one of our main focuses.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like it's critical. Well, good stuff. Thank you so much, Bridget. As always, your contributions are well appreciated and certainly valuable. I'm sure I can speak on behalf of everybody here that they certainly, if they have any questions, they could reach out. If you wouldn't mind chatting your email address to the chat box, people could reach you offline if they have any certain questions. And I want to pause. Does anyone have any additional questions for Bridget before I move on to our speaker and Chris? Going once, going twice. Good deal. Well, thanks again. It's my pleasure to introduce Chris Furtick. I've known him for a while as well. I know I sound like a broken record. I believe a lot of this is about relationships, and I've known Chris for some time. He's got a phenomenal background. I may be just a tad biased, and won't share why, but Chris has a proven background in information security and technology as a leader. Has a consultative voice. Even though a lot of people go to market with that vernacular, he actually does have a consultative voice. Knowing Chris over the years, even in the most high intense situations, he seems to keep this poise about him. It's actually alarming and frustrating, quite frankly, but he does not get emotional. He seems to be down to earth no matter who he's talking to at what level, and I admire that as a personal quality. As a director of security engineering incident response for Fortalice, Furtick manages a team of incident responders and security engineers. He leads all of incident response and planning activities for the company. He performs incident triage from forensic perspective, including determination of scope, urgency, and potential impact, acquires and collect computer artifacts, including malware, user activity, and log files, etc., and provides threat analysis, mitigation, and countermeasure recommendations. I don't want to steal too much of your thunder because I'm sure you're going to delve into that a little bit. But prior to joining Fortalice, Chris was the director of security engineering for North State Telecommunication or Technology Solutions, which I believe is now Segra. It's been a lot of things, and he was there from inception. I certainly won't steal that from him as well, but he was one of the first employees for the initial company, and that's changed form over time. And now he's fortunate enough to be with Fortalice. So I will again hit mute and turn it over to Chris.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Matt. I guess I owe you a bourbon, man. I really appreciate that. Was a long, nice intro. Yeah, that's true. So I'm really excited to be able to talk with you guys today. This should be a free-flowing conversation, right? If you've got a question, put it in the chat. Let's talk about it. Let's work through it. This can be a heavy topic, right? This is oftentimes folks come to us in dire straits, right? Sometimes they come to us. We've had folks tell us that it's the worst day of their 20-year career when they come to us, right? So we try to shepherd them through those incidents. And what I'm going to tell you today are some tips and tricks that I've learned over time that I wish someone would told these clients before I showed up. So again, it's really great to meet most of you. I've met some of you already. I'm noticing some of the names, so I appreciate you guys being here, but I'm glad to be able to meet you here in a proactive manner. So we'll go ahead and jump in. Again, if you've got questions, Matt's going to help me work the chat room, so I'm glad to answer any questions that you have. I'll get as technical as you want me to. We can dive right in. So let me get here. First off, we have to know where we're going. I always start meetings with agendas. Just an overview, the topic we'll talk about in just a moment. We'll talk a little bit about me, which is weird, but we'll talk about ransomware, kind of the statistics that are current now, and then we'll give you some do's and don'ts. And that's really why you're here, right? That's why you listen to Bridget for all that, and that's why you're here, is to try to figure out what are the takeaways, what are the 5 to 6 items that you can go back and implement to keep you more secure tomorrow, and we'll definitely get to that. So I promise not to use this graphic with the lady's hand writing things through the entire slide deck. But first off, again, we want to talk about the anatomy of a ransomware attack. Ransomware attacks are on the rise. Over the past 6 months, we've seen a significant uptick, not only in the proliferation, but also in the asking price for the ransom, which is problematic. So we're going to tell you how we're seeing them come in and how they'll move around, and we're going to give you some ways to prepare and how to respond. The biggest thing I think takeaway is that there's going to be some pitfalls to avoid, and we'll talk you through those as well. All this information is real. Most of it is based on a single case, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but all the data has been anonymized. So you're not going to hear me name names here. To Bridget's point, we're kind of professional secret keepers, right? We won't tell you the client name, but we will tell you as much data as we can about it. So if you've got a question, please don't hesitate to ask. First off, Bridget and Matt have already done a pretty good job. I'm Chris Furtick, Director of Incident Response and Security Engineering, which is a mouthful of a title, but it basically means if the poop hits the fan, I'm the one who gets the call, and I'm okay with that. 10 years of cybersecurity experience. Started out with Stalwart, as some of you guys on here I'm sure are aware, employee number 11 there, and they got bought and moved on, and now I'm with Fortalice, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come back to a smaller, more boutique firm, which is where I started. I started in Charlotte doing professional services in 2011. So I'm based in South Carolina. I'm about 2 hours south of Charlotte, and I'm 2 hours north of Atlanta. So I can be in either one of the metros relatively quickly. I am a SANS subject matter expert for security leadership. That means I do a little work for them, mostly around content creation and writing exam questions and reviewing questions for their certifications. I'm CISSP, so I'm like just a lot of you. I got mine in 2015, so it was before the adaptive tests, and I'm thankful for that. I understand it's a good bit more challenging now. And I am a technical editor for McGraw-Hill. The last book I worked on was their GPEN all-in-one certification exam. So that came out about 6 months ago and it's got pretty good reviews. Those are a lot of graphics at the bottom of certifications I have. I'm glad to talk about any of those if you guys want to have an offline conversation. One thing I'm really proud of is the Greenville B-Sides. We started that about 3 years ago, and I helped organize that. And it's really about giving back to the community. So I live right outside of Greenville. We have a great conference every year and have a really good time with it. So we'll keep moving right along. One more thing that I mentioned, my cat Smokey and the Bandit think I'm pretty cool, usually, as long as I keep feeding them. So, all right, ransomware by the numbers. So Q4 of 2020 is the last statistics we have. Q1 of 2021 has not come out yet. So you'll see the first stat there. The average cost of dealing with a ransomware attack is $732,000. That's a ton of money, right? That's a lot more than most of the ransoms that we're seeing asked for. But what that includes is the downtime, as well as rebuilding servers, all the overtime work that it takes to bring an environment back up. Ransom attacks that threaten leaks. This is the name and shame situation, right? So I come in, I steal your data, and then I publish on the dark web that I have your data, right? So I'm going to threaten that regardless. 70% of the time we see that happen. It's not always the case that they have data or they exfil data, but they threaten it more times than not. This statistic is surprising to me. So the median number of victims of employees for victim companies is 234. I think a lot of folks in cybersecurity think, oh, ransomware is something that the larger companies have to worry about, and it's absolutely not. We're seeing it targeting smaller companies more and more often, and that's troubling, right? It's problematic. A mom and pop shop or a relatively small manufacturer can be devastated and taken out of business relatively quickly with these type of attacks. The average days of downtime is 21. That's not necessarily all production stop, but it is reduced capacity. So that's the time from when we identify the issue to when we're back to full working again is around 21. Number one attack vector is email phish, and that's 50%. And that is a relatively new statistic. So prior to Q4 of 2020, most attacks came in through an RDP, an open RDP session. RDP has actually gone down some to around 30 to 31%. But if you look at those two combined, 80% of ransomware attacks either come in through email phishes or RDP open on the internet. Those are significant things, and we can stop those, right? We can train our users not to click on links. We can train them, not to open spreadsheets with macros and things like that. That's how the email phish gets stopped. And having RDP open on the internet, that's a relatively easy scan, right? We can run a scan for 3389, and then we can add, multi-factor if we do have to have RDP open. So if you guys have any questions about those stats at all, I want to call Bravo Sierra on them. I've got some documents I can provide you, and we can talk about them. But it's really staggering, I think, the amount that it costs. Cool. We will keep moving on then, friends. This is the case overview. Again, I'm not going to name names, but the main case that we're going to talk about now, the victim organization was a North Carolina-based manufacturer. Their footprint, they've got 20 different sites in 10 states, 2 different data centers. The initial demand that they had was for 25 Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin today is around $63,000 each. So you can do the math, how quickly that adds up. They did end up paying the ransom and negotiated it down to 12.5 Bitcoin. Still 12.5 times 60,000 is a significant investment. Their downtime was 12 days. They weren't 100% at the end of 12 days, but they were almost dead in the water for those 12 days. Negotiation time, this is important. So some folks think it's oh, I'm going to pay the ransom and I'll get the decryption key, then we'll move forward. It took 6 days from the time that the leadership decided that yes, we want to engage a negotiator to the time that they were able to get a decryption tool. So imagine the production that you would lose for 6 days, almost a full week. So that's significant. The attack vector, it's unclear. We didn't have enough logs to be able to say, but we think it was a business email compromise. Everything pointed towards that. Did they engage the FBI? Yes, they engaged informally and formally, and the variant was snatch. This is a copy of the ransom note. You'll see here, I've blurred out some of the information, but this is a business, right? These attackers are running a business. They are leaving these files on desktops, and they're saying, hey, contact us. We can get your files back very quickly. So this is the basis of the rest of the conversation that we're going to have here. So I will keep moving on. Again, if you guys have any questions, please let me know.
Hey, Chris, there's a couple questions in the chat. One says, who did the negotiation? And was it their cybersecurity insurance company that did that? First question.
Yeah, first question. So there are several different options for negotiators. We helped the client work through that. And first off, let me say that we at Fortalice, we don't do the negotiations, and we don't suggest that folks negotiate with ransomware. At some point, it becomes a business decision. So I'll get that out front. So the negotiations for this firm, Coveware was the main negotiator, and there was a supplement, one of their partner companies, but I'll have to look it up. It might have been Keyview, but I'll tell you in just a minute. And the second question, Sean?
Yeah, it was what process did they use to acquire the Bitcoin, and did the insurance company manage that, or was that a third party
Third party manages that, and we'll talk about the negotiation, what you need to know about negotiation. So, and insurance specifically. So the insurance company did not negotiate. The insurance company will reimburse them for things that happen, but different policies cover different things. So there is a 3% transaction fee that you have to add on top of this. So imagine you negotiated down to 10 Bitcoin. There's another 3% on top of that to have it sent over. And that doesn't include the negotiation fee as well. But we'll talk about that.
Will you talk about the incident coordination process as it relates to insurance companies, how they're underwriting the policies now versus where they were 2-3 years ago? Because I know that was a very soft market then, and there's been a lot of maturation since then, and it's a different landscape in its entirety now. So I'm sure you'll touch on it, but just want to see that.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and it's almost a really good segue. Give me just a second, and we'll get right to it here. Again, these are proactive. I've got this broken out into proactive and reactive things to do. So let's move right into it. And I think that kind of gets right to your point, Matt. So the first thing to do is review your cyber insurance. Policies are all created differently, right? To Matt's point, years ago, it was, oh, I've got cybersecurity check. I've got that insurance already. I don't even have to worry about it. That's not the case anymore. They're getting much more granular in what they'll cover and what they will not cover. This particular client did have cybersecurity insurance, but it only paid up to $50,000 for a ransom. That's not even 1 Bitcoin, right? So that was their challenge. Also, a lot of the insurance companies will not pay for forensic services, right? They might pay for you to recover to get built back up, but they don't pay for a forensic firm to come in and help you figure out what happened. So you've got to check that first, right? You've got to know up front who your carrier is, make sure the folks you're going to work with are approved by that carrier and know what your coverage amounts are. It's much more granular these days, and they're getting a lot more strict, so to speak, of what they'll pay for and what they won't. So yeah, it's a challenge, and it's the number one thing that I want you guys to think about from this slide deck is go check my cyber insurance, make sure our folks have what we need to protect us. So any other questions, Sean? Were there other questions in the chat or anything?
No questions in the chat around that one, Chris.
Okay. And Matt, does that get your question covered?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big topic, so I don't want to spend too much time in a rabbit hole, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's huge, right? Insurance is critical. It's not just a checkbox and say, okay, we're cool. All right, we'll move on. The next thing, proactive tip, test your recovery strategy. A lot of folks say, well, I've got backups. I'm good on ransomware. I don't care if ransomware comes in. Yeah, but are you checking your restoration process, right? When's the last time that you recovered a backup and you know what it takes to do that, right? Lots of folks come through and say, man, I got backups. Don't even worry about it. What we're seeing is ransomware attackers are coming in and they're going after backups first before you even know they're in your environment. They're deleting your backups. They're getting access to your backup account. And that automatically takes your recovery process out of the picture. So that puts leverage on you to have to pay the ransom. I would say you need to have a backup strategy, but backup strategy is not good enough, right? One of my old mentors used to say, amateurs back up and professionals restore, right? If you can't restore from a good spot without losing data, then you're not doing it right. So that's the next proactive tip, is to make sure you've got a strategy, and that someone is out there going through once a month, picking 5% of your machines and trying to restore them, making sure that you know what that process looks like and that it's very well documented. Cool. All right, we'll keep going here. Don't assume you're safe. We talked about this already. Small businesses are the biggest target at the moment. So companies with less than 1,000 employees make up over 70% of victims. This is not just a big player situation, right? Like, they're not only going after, Target and Coca-Cola and folks like that, right? They're coming after the smaller shops. And those are the ones that could be the most heavily impacted by this. And by the way, they're often the ones who don't have all the protections in place. So that's what we're seeing. Typically for the smaller shops, they're getting access through RDP. So they have moved devices to the cloud perhaps, or maybe was a technology shift and the RDP access is left open. No one's verified it. So that's one of the largest attack vectors for smaller companies.
Sorry to interrupt you. We had a question come in. How often should backups be tested?
Yeah, so I would say we do 5% every month, right? So if you've got 100 machines, I want to test 5 of them every month, and I would rotate through them. So you know, however many devices that is, you know, if it's 100, what have you, I would do once a month. You should be doing that.
That cadence vary based on, you know, factors, various different inputs, or is it just more? How do you mix up the cadence so it's not so predictable if someone's really, I don't know how close and sticky somebody could be if they're monitoring your environment, but do you mix that up as much as you can, or do you just establish an operating rhythm and just, you know, operate from there?
Yeah, I would just go with the operating rhythm just to get a maturity level, right? If they're watching how often you do backups and things of that nature, then you've got an advanced attacker, and it's probably not going to help you anyway. What this is more designed about are folks who say, I've got this checkbox backup done, I'm good. What you should have is a junior resource going through and following your restoration process. And that's what's important, right? Making sure that we're going through and we know what it takes, and we want to time it, right? How do we get more efficient at it, right? Maybe it includes, you know, writing some Ansible scripts to do the restoration. Like, those are the things that I would be trying to make this go quickly, not just because of ransomware, but also because of disaster recovery, right? If we had a major, you know, issue, how would we recover from that? So that's how I would approach that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Again, every organization is a target with the proliferation of ransomware as a service. You guys may or may not be familiar. You probably are. Ransomware as a service is a huge problem. Imagine, think about a Microsoft Office license. You go buy a license. You now have a license to run the software. That happens exactly the same for many of the larger variants of ransomware. So you, as a person, you can go on the dark web today for less than $100. You can go buy a license for ransomware. If you're, you know, an offensive person, you can go hack someone, and then it's kind of off to the races at that point. So I don't, if I'm an attacker, I don't have to go figure out how to do the ransomware, how to, you know, run the back end. I've got a partner to be able to do that. All I have to do is get into the organization. Ransomware as a service is a kind of a huge deal. So with the proliferation of that, it makes everyone a target. Cool. We will keep moving.
We had a couple questions come in.
Okay, cool.
Some of these may be in you know, related to what you're talking about specifically, or maybe from previous slides, or maybe they're jumping ahead. So I don't know what's next. So I'm just going to kind of sprinkle them in. And if you want to hit pause on the responses to wait to your slides, so they don't want to steal your thunder. Do you think the rise in cyber insurance is making ransomware more attractive, knowing that most companies have it, and will be paying more for it, I guess, especially mid or to small size companies that perhaps maybe not have the capital and the cash ready to be able to do something? And this was a question from Rick Doden from Centene. So.
Yeah, Rick, that's a great question. I 100% believe the uptick is because folks know there are insurance out there. We are seeing insurance companies targeted by ransomware, not necessarily to access their environment, but to get their client list, right? If I can break into an insurance company and then I have a list of all the clients who have cyber insurance, that's exactly who I'm going to go target, right? I know they've got the coverage. I know that I can go get money out of them. That's precisely where I'm going to go. And I'm going to burn the insurance company down on my way out, right? Because why not? No reason not to. But yeah, 100%.
I talked to a friend of mine who had an issue where he did a case that they found the insurance document on their server and knew how much the insurance company would pay. So they didn't negotiate. It's like, your insurance will pay this much. That's how much I want.
That's exactly right. And that's one of the slides we'll talk about here is they're going to know who you are. But yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. We'll talk about it in just a second. Cool. All right, we'll keep moving forward until Matt tells me we got another question in the chat.
Hey, we got one more question, Chris.
Okay, Sean.
Yeah. Still around that ransomware, what about paying the actors who are on the government sanction list? I know you said you guys don't recommend paying the ransom, but I know there were some issues around with OFAC, around the new regulation where people will be penalized for paying those folks that are on that sanction list.
Yep. So that's a great question, and I appreciate bringing it up. So in October 2020, OFAC released an update or a bulletin saying any folks who pay a ransom to any organization on their list of sanctioned countries are subject to penalization themselves. How the ransomware negotiators are tackling that is that you have to go through an OFAC check before they will send your ransom over. So not just the Bitcoin wallet they're sending it to, they're also checking you as a person to make sure that you're not on the OFAC list. So I've had folks on a Saturday afternoon say, hey, I've got to get this copy of my driver's license over to my negotiator because they won't transfer the money until we can go through the OFAC check. So that absolutely is a challenge. And the way the negotiators are tackling it is they call it an OFAC check. So basically they check the Bitcoin wallet and they check the folks who are transferring the money in. Cool, thank you. That's a really good segue to where we are at the moment. You need to understand the negotiation. This is not for the faint of heart, so to speak, right? So you got two choices: either negotiate on your own or engage a negotiator. Your attackers are savvy. They'll know your price. Kind of that point that Rick just mentioned, they'll know kind of what vertical you're in. They'll know what they can ask for. They're not going to ask a mom and pop shop for $20 million, right? And they're not going to ask Target for $5,000. They're going to know kind of where your pain point is. The attackers are running a business. They know better than to ask for something that you can't produce. Negotiators that you work with, again, there's several that we've talked with and kind of interviewed for other clients. They all charge a flat rate, but that rate varies, right? So it's between $3,000 and $10,000 is what we've seen. That might change tomorrow. I don't want you guys to think that what I'm giving you is Bible gospel, but that's what we've seen thus far. So they charge at whether you get a decryption tool or not. Think about that, right? So imagine I go and I get a negotiator. I pay them, $7,000. Let's say I give them money for 12 Bitcoin and transfer that over, and I pay the 3%. And now, whether they get me the tool back or not, I still have to pay that money. So it's a bit of a challenge there. The one good thing is negotiators can provide statistics. So typically in the statement of work, when you're working with a negotiator, they'll say, with this variant of ransomware, we're 90% successful of talking them down, and we're 98% of getting data back. So you don't go into it blind. I don't want to throw an alarm up that you can't move forward. I do want you to understand, though, that negotiators are going to get paid regardless. And sometimes these things don't work out. Sometimes, what we thought was an easy button paying, it turns out not to be. So we'll talk a bit more about negotiating here as well in a few minutes. Proactive tip: have a relationship with an IR firm. This feels a little self-serving, but it's really not. Yes, we are an IR firm, and yes, we'd love to be able to help you if you have an issue. But frankly, I don't care who you talk to. If you have a relationship with someone, you're going to work out much better on the end. And Gerard on my team, who's a principal incident handler, way more experienced than I am, he likens this to negotiating with the fire department when your house is on fire, right? You don't want to go through and have to get a statement of work for someone when your roof's on fire, right? You want to have a pre-negotiated relationship with someone that gives you kind of pre-negotiated rates, so you know what it's going to cost you before you go in. You also have a phone a friend, right? You got someone you can call me in the middle of the night and say, hey, I got a problem. I need you to help, right? It also puts you at the front of the line. If we have other clients that are coming in, if you have a pre-negotiated agreement, that puts you near the front of the line. And it also gets the insurance approvals up front and out of the way. That's important. You don't want to be dealing with having to get the lawyers involved on a Saturday because production got shut down. If you can have that negotiation done up front, you're a lot better off and you can move much more quickly. Again, it feels a little self-serving, but that's not the case at all. I just want you guys to understand how you can survive these things better. This is the last slide of the proactive tips. These are for more of the technical folks. These are the things that I would like for you to do in the next 5 days. This is your action item. Please, please, please go change the password on your backup account. Probably over 80% of the ones we've worked in the past 6 months have leveraged using a Veeam account to go through and destroy backups and work throughout the network, right? Think about your backup account. It typically has domain admin. It typically can get anywhere on your network. So that's what they're targeting. They're going after that account almost every time. And when's the last time you changed it? It's probably been years, right? Whenever you rolled out your backup solution. So that's the biggest thing to look at. Next is scan your IP range for 3389 being open. 3389 is RDP, right? So someone from the outside world being able to get a remote session in your environment. Please go check that again within the next 5 days. Azure blobs, if you're on Azure now, you've got Azure blobs that has storage, right? There's a function on there called soft delete, and it's not enabled by default. But if you're storing backups in Azure blobs, you need to have soft delete turned on. Soft delete is like versioning, right? So if I go put a backup on the blob and an attacker comes in and hits delete, it goes right away. But if I have the soft delete turned on, I can version and say, hey, I want to keep this for 3 months. Even if I hit delete, put it over here to the side. Don't actually delete it for 3 months. Having that turned on is critical. There are a lot of folks who have Azure and that's not turned on by default. And the next tip is if you're using AWS buckets, enable MFA delete. So that's a second factor. So if someone wanted to go in and delete files from your S3 buckets, you can enable MFA. So they can't do it without that second factor. So those are the 4 technical proactive tips. Any questions about those? You guys are making it easy on me. We'll keep rolling.
Tell me about the 24/7, the model that pretty much all IR firms have to endure these days is with the amount of inbound incidences that occur. Tell me about the team, the fatigue associated with that. How are people navigating those waters? How are you able to, especially you guys are really good about work-life balance. How do you balance that spectrum when all this is happening, especially when you guys are making headway in that market?
Yeah, it's tough. So once again, to Bridget's point earlier, we've kind of got a white glove approach. So once we come into an environment where we're really high touch with the client, not only we're doing technical things, but we're also kind of shepherding them through and letting them know, typically here's what we see or here's how we go. How I start the day, most every day that we do an incident is I've got a 5-minute huddle up with the technical team. And I tell them what to expect that day, right? You're getting tired. You're probably going to be making mistakes on day 2, right? Those are the days we've got to start scheduling breaks for people. The first 24 to 48 hours, people are amped. They're wide open. They've got this issue and they're trying to work through it. Days 2 and 3 is when they start slowing down and they'll make a mistake. So first off, we set the stage like, hey, this is going to be tough. It's going to be difficult. We're going to shepherd you through it though, and we're going to help you out. But yeah, by day 3, we want you to start having shift work, right? You want the team to be large, day 1 and 2 to do the triage. By day 3, we're usually getting into the containment and recovery. That's we can say, okay, we want 3 people on in the morning, we want 3 people on in the afternoon, and we're going to do overnights for 2 more days. Then maybe the next day we don't have overnights at all, but that's kind of how it stages. Again, it's really all hands on deck. The place is on fire. We got all the firemen here for the first 48 or so hours, and after that we start staging it out because it's untenable for folks to be able to do this day in and day out. Just long term, we just can't do it. So that's one of the biggest challenges, though, and that's a large challenge with IR firms as well, right? Our folks who are getting burnt out, right? It happens really easily. So that's a good question. Any other questions right now, folks? We'll keep going on. So these are reactive. These are the things that's going to help us if we are, God forbid, in a ransomware attack, if something happens. These are the things that are going to help us go through and make it through on the other end. The first thing I will tell you is have a containment strategy. How would we isolate an attack, right? If we have 5 different sites, how would we keep just one site contained? And that looks like shutting off network connectivity. Here's a pro tip. Port 445 is how we see over 90% of ransomware spread. That's SMB. That's used by almost everyone, right? So it's difficult to say we're going to cut SMB off for everyone, but you have to know how you're going to cut that off and how do we isolate a particular network. The other thing to think about is, yeah, I can hop on and remote into this remote site and cut off connectivity back to my main data center. Okay, cool. So how are you going to bring it back up, right? If that site is in the east end of Alaska and you don't have technical boots on the ground, how are you going to get there, right? So that's the problem. Things being able to move in that manner, it's difficult, right? It's difficult to say how we're going to get things back on because people are working manically and they're not thinking about how do I bring it back up because they're trying to isolate at the time. So have a plan. That's the big thing, right? Have a plan of how we're going to do it, and also removing administrative privileges. That I would venture to say most of you have Active Directory domains. And I would venture to say most of you have domain admins, and you're probably not doing a great job of going through and changing those passwords and culling those out, because that's typically what we see. Have a plan. I mean, that's really what's important. Just have a plan to be able to do that. So any questions about containment? Ooh, we'll keep moving right on here. Reactive tip, paying the ransom isn't an easy button, right? So first off, you got to figure out what the ransom amount is, how much data is going to be unrecoverable via backup, right? If we know we have backups and we're going to be able to bring the site up in 5 days, is it worth us paying 12.5 Bitcoin? I don't know. What are the other things you have to consider, right? If they put my data online and all my customers' data is then online, what is the implication of that, right? They're going to use all those things as leverage. So you've got to figure out that this is not just, oh, well, we've got insurance and insurance is going to pay for the ransom. Why do I care? No, it's much more than that, right? It's much more than that. So again, don't think that paying the ransom is going to be easy. And sometimes you don't even get the decryption tool that you're paying for. So paying the ransom is not the easy button. Reactive tip, expect the attackers to know you. They will do research, right? They will have pulled an org chart. They will have seen what your gross income is. They will know your leadership. They may contact your leadership. We had one recently where they reached out to the CEO and said, hey, your IT team is dealing with an issue. We've told them how much it would cost for that issue to go away. Maybe it's time for you to lean on them to make this problem go away. So they will know these things. We talked about this a little bit earlier. They'll know your insurance carrier oftentimes. That's kind of to Rick's point earlier. It's a challenge, right? These folks aren't coming in and just blindly saying, hey, we want 5 Bitcoin. They're going to know, and they're typically going to be 10 to 15% of what they can find online about your gross income. That's what they know your pain point is around there. So even if they don't know what your insurance coverage is, they may know that already.
Chris, is there a point in which you engage the FBI for that? I know Brian Cyprian's on here as well, and he had another presentation back in January. He touched on some of these elements, but is there a certain point at which you need to engage law enforcement, and at what point is that a triggering effect?
Yeah, so we do that for our clients as well. And it's one of the slides that's coming up here. We'll get to it in just a second. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The FBI has been valuable in providing threat intel for us on our cases. So we'll get to that in just a second.
Not Brian, though, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Make sure.
In fact, it's I think, Matt, I think you've been setting me up, man. You've been looking at my
I've been trying to put you in an awkward position as much as possible. So you're welcome.
So be willing to engage law enforcement, right? We can do this 2 different ways. One is informally saying, hey, we have a client, they have snatch variant in their environment. What intel can you provide us about it? And the FBI will have a dossier. They'll say, these are the basic indicators of compromise. These are typically what the ransom asks are. These are typically how it gets paid. So they'll give us that information. The second way is to do it in a more formal way. So they want to know what vertical you're in. They want to know your name and things of that nature. Again, that's up to you whether you want to release that or not. We can certainly help broker that. We've got great contacts with our friends there. But what that does, it actually helps them build their case moving forward, right? So it gives information from your attack becomes part of the intel that they pass on to the next attack, and it helps them build cases against folks. So I'm a big fan of that. Again, it's up to the client. I would encourage them to at least anonymously engage, and we can do that. We can tell them, hey, I got this thing. They're based in Charlotte or based in New Jersey or what have you. Here's what they're coming up against, and they can give us some intel. Another part of engaging them formally is that they will get on and have a conversation and tell you, like, hey, this is what we know about it. I know you've gotten this from Fortalice already, but here's some other things that we can offer. So There are certain offices around the country that work on specific variants of the ransomware. So, Snatch might be based in Tennessee, and another one maybe somewhere else, and that's all they work on. It's just that variant. So they're very up to date to that. So I'm a big fan of that. Again, we can. Some folks decide, hey, we don't want to engage law enforcement at any time, but I'm a big fan of it. So, questions about that? Cool. We're going to keep on rolling here. Reactive tip, do not rush the process. There are going to be folks on your team, folks above us, stakeholders, they want to get to recovery, right? They don't care about all the detection, the analysis, the containment, the eradication. They want to get back up and running. This is not the point where we can take 9 women and make a baby in a month. We can't rush this process. It's a process that we have to follow. And I tell you, if you don't do it, you're going to wish that you did. 3 Fridays ago, we worked a case where they got an alert from their EDR tool. They went and pulled a plug on the device. They thought they had it contained. They went and shut off other sites. They thought they were good. Cool, we'll help you guys tomorrow morning. Saturday morning, we get on and whoops, they didn't cut off one of the other sites. The entire site data center was encrypted. So what happened there is they didn't do a proper scoping, right? We tried to help them. We tried, and they're like, no, we're good. That we called early. We're not going to worry about it. And then that turned into, as you might imagine, a much longer engagement for them to come back to the recovery process. Proper scoping is the most difficult aspect, but it informs everything else. Imagine trying to figure out how you're going to recover, but you don't know what went down, right? That's the biggest challenge. So any questions about that? You're going to get pressure. I can tell you that now. You're going to have the stakeholders, hey, I want to have a meeting every hour on the hour to the next 48 hours. You're like, hey, man, I can do that, but that's going to take away from us working through that. Any questions about that? Cool. This is really a part of our kind of our incident command is coaching people through that and how to set expectations, right? So yes, Mr. Customer, Mr. Stakeholder, Mr. CEO, you want an update every 2 hours. Here's what I would like to propose. Let's do it every 4 hours, and we'll have a larger update every 8 hours with a larger team. Got to set the expectation, right? Because they don't know, they've never been through this. You got to tell them what you need from them to help do your job. We can coach you through that. Cool. We will keep going. Reactive tip, do not rely on your tools. This is a challenge, right, folks? We've got an EDR tool and we paid for NDR, and someone's watching. Why am I worried about ransomware? Recent case, this case, they actually rebooted the Snatch variant, rebooted into safe mode. Do you guys know what happens to your EDR tool booted into safe mode? Basically neutered, right? Yeah. So when you boot into safe mode, that's when the encryption happened. That's when the note popped up, and basically they had no visibility into the environment other than when people came to work the next day, they had a big note on their desktop that everything had been encrypted. So attackers know this. They change their variants and they change their methodology quite often. Also, forensic evidence is often damaged. So we call it time stomping the logs, right? They'll get logs that are based on a device or on a firewall, and they'll either wipe them clean or make them where there's no time on them at all. So it's very difficult at that point to be able to say this started on X date and it started from this machine, because our logs didn't capture that. You need to be sending logs to some type of log aggregation, whether that's a SIM tool or an elk stack or somewhere else. You got to get them off the device and somewhere that's protected so we can do that. So again, don't rely on tools. I've seen a lot of attackers recently, again, on their way out, they're burning the place down and they're making it much more difficult for you to recover. And that means you're much more likely to pay them money. So we will keep on keeping on. Reactive tip, don't expect the recovery in 48 hours. We just kind of talked about that. You're going to be down for several days. It's not going to be a situation where we're going to have this thing wrapped up in 47 minutes with commercials, right? This is going to be a device down situation. You're going to be out of work. You're not going to be able to function normally for several days, right? You just got to set that expectation up front, and you got to set it up higher than us, right? We understand that. We got to make sure the folks above us are understanding that. And that's where the challenge sometimes comes in. Rebuilding from a backup is not a short process. Not this case, but the one after that, they thought they were good, right? All their backups are on tape. So cool, right? We can restore from tape. Well, how long do you think it takes to rebuild to disk a 2 terabyte file server from a tape? I can tell you it was 4.5 days, right? So there's 2 terabytes on the tape. You got to get it back to disk before you can restore from it. That's a problem, right? You got to think through these things. So often negotiating and paying a ransom, the negotiation cycle is typically 6 to 7 days. And that's a stat from Coveware. They're one of the major negotiators. And decryption tools are typically poorly written. And I'll tell you where they mostly struggle are on larger files. So larger database files, anything over about 60 gigs or so, if you try to decrypt them with the tools that you're given from the attackers, they typically will time out. The only way to stop that is to give the virtual machine that you're using to decrypt them more resources, right? So if you got to put that on a host and give it 128 gigs of RAM, whatever you got to do to get it larger than the file it's decrypting, that's the only way to combat that. But again, they're not written for efficiency, right? They're written to get you your data back. So cool. Any questions about that? You guys are making it easy on me. Be prepared for publicity, not the good kind of publicity. What we're seeing oftentimes is name and shame, right? So, Mr. Customer, you have 72 hours to engage us and pay this ransom, or here's the Tor site we're going to post your data on. So it's not just about getting your data at that point, right? It's the reputational damage. And that's a compelling factor for leadership. Folks above us are concerned about that. So it's not just about getting back up and running. It's also about, what about all of our customer data out there? What about our intellectual property, right? Imagine if our entire customer list got out and was downloaded on the dark web. That's a problem. So typically they'll post screenshots of your data. So they'll say, 72 hours, we want you to have this up. In 72 hours, they don't hear from you on their Onion site, their Tor site. They'll say, this company XYZ was infiltrated on Y day, right? And they'll post screenshots from their RDP session that shows, you can tell it's definitely your data that they were looking at. The next thing they'll typically do, 72 hours after that, is to post a sample of your data set. I've found that they will tell you this every time, but sometimes it's a bluff. So we've had clients who they had screenshots of the RDP session, but the data they posted for it did not belong to the client. So keep that in mind. I'm not telling you that happens all the time, but I have seen them that they will bluff, and you can use that to your advantage as well, right? You can bluff also. I've seen folks do that with negotiations. They'll say, hey, it's going to cost me, $20K to get this rebuilt in 2 days. I'll offer you $20K in Bitcoin if you'll give us the decryptor. And that's potentially works, right? But you got to have that communication established. They'll post org charts and they'll contact your leadership, usually through a VoIP number, Twilio, Google Voice, something like that. That's they'll reach out. So.
Hey, Chris, what's the PR and comm strategy when it comes to obviously an incident and there's obviously a breach, there's an investigation done, you're working towards restoration. At what point do you recommend to your clients, you probably should reach out to your customer base, you probably should reach out to your vendors, et cetera, et cetera. If you're a privately held company, it's at your discretion. Obviously, if you're publicly traded, it's a different type of scenario, but give us a little bit insight to what the recommendations are.
Yeah, so first off, I am not a lawyer and I am not your lawyer. I always preface this conversation with that. So you have to engage your legal team, whether they're internal or external, and let them know where you are. They are the only ones that can use the B word, the breach word. So we talk about issues and incidents. So that's how I first set the stage. Let's talk about nomenclature. We talk about issues and events. The next is the legal team has to weigh in on when we have to engage PR and do notifications. So from our perspective, it doesn't really help me one way or the other if we start telling clients. But what we do coach folks into doing is making sure they have counsel engaged, again, whether that's internal or external. But that typically doesn't happen. It's not a day one. It's not even a day 3 thing, Matt, typically. It's usually we've identified the issue. We've got a containment strategy. We're thinking about recovery. Okay, now we can assess what was accessed, right? Do we have logs that shows that, XY data, what has left, right? We've got X number of terabytes, what have you. Once we can actually wrap our heads around it, then we start saying, okay, then now we have to notify based on legal precedent or based on regulation when we have to engage. So it's a sticky question that you ask. And I would tell you that every organization is different and they're all subject to different matters. That's why we coach folks to always have an IR plan and have someone on speed dial from legal to be able to have that conversation with. That was a little bit of a non-answer. And then that's not, I didn't do that on purpose, Matt. It's
the MBA school answer. Well, obviously it depends. But with that said, you have a lot of organizations that don't have a program, they don't have a hygiene, they have no IR plan, they have no BCP or DR. It's like, oh shit, something happened and all of a sudden we need to figure this out. It's like, well, we've notified our customers about 6 months down the road. Well, it's like, well, you've been compromised, as has their data so I'm just wondering what you're recommending to organizations that have a non-existent security organization and what the recommendation is, especially the CEO who's probably going to be up at night.
Yeah, so we have regular touch points with the CEO and let him know where we are. And we start coaching him that, hey, you probably don't need to engage legal just yet. Maybe that's a day 4 thing. Maybe that's a day 5 thing. Or no, we want to engage legal earlier. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I mean, and customers is who we'd start worrying about at that point. We want to keep legal engaged relatively early in the process. And it looks like Brian may have unmuted. You might have something to add to that as well.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say too, I know you're talking kind of like the external clients and customers. It's also important to consider that internal messaging, because your employees are going to notice something's going on, and oftentimes there's a lot of chatter, and sometimes that could get out. So that it's very important to think through those communication strategies. And in the event of that, how do you notify the workforce if your systems are encrypted or you're using VoIP, and what it should look like, right? Because a lot of times these actors are monitoring just to see if they were effective.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's part of kind of how we set the stage when we first arrive at an incident, is that, hey, all the conversations that we're having now is privileged. We don't know what happened. We don't have information to be able to get out to the rest of the environment. So these are things that we are talking about are not to be shared outside of it. After about day 2 or so, then we start saying, okay, here's how we portray this message to internal clients. But that's a good point, Brian. We want to make sure that we're giving our internal folks the information that they need, but not more than that, right? The absence of information, people start creating their own information, and that never works out well. So we tell them we have an IT issue, we're going to be down for X or Y, but we want to be in comms with them, right? If we don't have that communication going, then we're going to be really challenged. Cool. Any other questions about the publicity, negative publicity, in fact?
Hey, Chris, so how should they handle the social media side of it too? Does that come into play as well?
It does, yeah. So typically that's part of the PR strategy. Again, that comes in around day 4 or so. So first off, sometimes attackers are known to go to social media and say, hey, I've breached X company, and they'll even tag the client. And that's, if that happens on day 2, then we have to start addressing it on day 2. If we haven't been tagged or there's no chatter on the social medias at that point, typically around day 4 or 5 is when we start doing communication goes out, right? So we make sure that we have someone on deck, a PR person that has a message that can send it out via, Twitter and LinkedIn and what have you. And they are also versed in case they're contacted by media, right? The last thing we want to do is, end up on one of the media sites, Krebs site. Krebs calls someone and they give them, some incorrect information. So that's entirely part of the strategy of communication. So, yeah, again, that's typically around day 4 or 5 before we start thinking about that. Any other questions, guys? This is a great conversation. I really appreciate you guys asking questions. It makes it easy. All right, so I've got some reactive technical tasks. These are things to do ahead of time that are going to help us if you ever get into a ransomware situation. So plan and test your isolation plan. Port 445 is again, most of the ransomware that we're seeing are coming over 445 or are moving around on 445. So have a plan for that and know what it looks like. And who do we need to call when we got to shut that off between different sites? Backup and air gap domain controllers. So I was talking with a client earlier today and we talked about domain controllers. A lot of folks don't back up domain controllers because they figure replication, right? If I'm replicating to 4 other domain controllers, why do I need to back up a domain controller? bad problem, right? So if I come in and encrypt all your domain controllers, then what happens? So you need to back up and air gap a domain controller. And if you do that now, great, that's fine, right? It'll put it someplace that it can't be touched. So air gap, what does that mean, right? It means you can't get to it from 445. That means you can't get it from the rest of the network. So if I have to bring this network back up, the very first thing I'm typically going to need is a domain controller. So that's what I would suggest that you do. The next thing is identify and test an out-of-band communications plan. Kind of to Brian's point earlier, they're going to be monitoring communication, right? The attackers are going to know, they probably put in some auto forward rules. That's part of the next thing to address here, but have a plan, right? Or we're going to use Signal, or we're going to, use text, SMS, we're going to use Gmail accounts. I don't know what it is, but have a plan in place so that you know how you're going to communicate if all other communication is down, right? If VoIP is down and your internal exchange is down, how are you going to communicate and how are you going to coordinate tasks? So have an out-of-band communications plan. And the last part is enable alerting and blocking on auto forward rules. A lot of the attacks we're seeing recently, the attackers are putting in auto forward rules based on, hey, if this person, I know this is an IT person because I compromised their account, I'm going to forward all their emails to me. So I'll be able to see what their plan is, right? I'll know who they're talking to and what their plan forward is. We need to put in auto forward rules so we'll know if that happens proactively. So that are some of the technical things I would suggest you do over the next 5 days that will aid in response. That'll shorten your time to come back. Any
question? Have you seen any rapid recovery systems capabilities which have reduced the recovery time to days versus weeks?
Yeah, so there's a couple. One client is testing one right now, and I've been impressed so far with, and basically is versioning, right? What we're talking about is we have data, we're keeping it in storage, but we're doing versioning. So where would we keep that in the cloud? We keep that someplace else. That's up to you. But yes, those are shortening the time span. But the adoption rate right now is low. So a lot of folks don't have it in place. And also the amount of storage you would need to be able to do that can be problematic, right? So maybe you're doing file servers, but you're probably not doing SQL servers. So yeah, that definitely shortens the time. I would tell you that it may bring you back up a little bit quicker, and it might keep you from having to pay the ransom, but you're still going to have to work through the containment strategy and things like that. That's typically for folks who are a little more mature as well, to be honest with you, Matt. Those folks probably have some defenses put in already, but yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, good.
Any other questions from a technical aspect? Again, I can get as nitty gritty as you guys want to talk for sure.
Good.
All right. So that is it. I wanted to see what other questions that you have at this time, and how could this be better, right? What would have been more effective for you? How can we get better if we have this conversation again? So I'll open the floor up. Any questions that you guys have, please feel free to throw them out there, and we'll
You
talk.
have to see David Galloway's. No, Chris.
Doom and gloom.
He's gonna go buy some Ambien after your presentation.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
Manage the fear that's going to keep everybody up at night. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, especially almost at dinner. I mean, at sleep time, right? But I think information is power, and I think if you know more today than you did yesterday, you'll know how to weather these things, right? And that's it, right? That's how we're going to beat this. It's not going to be one-offs. It's going to be all of us coming together and sharing knowledge. So I'll get off my soapbox there, but any other questions that you guys have? Was the use of memes non-effective? You guys didn't find that funny at all? I expect to see some chuckles or something.
You didn't see me laughing going on in the background? I texted somebody. I was like, quote of the night was, what is it? What did I say, Tejas? I was like, take 9 women and make a baby overnight. I was like,
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, let's put that on the t-shirt.
Yeah, I was like,
You can probably sell that.
We have lots of good quotes from Chris. Around.
My next favorite is talking about making plans and battle plans and stuff. And I always say, my favorite philosopher Mike Tyson says everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the mouth, right? Like if we've got an IR plan, we've got to figure out, we've got to test it, go through tabletops and execute on it. But that really is a challenge. I think that we're not doing that. We think we've got this box checked. Now we're going to the next thing. If you don't test it, it doesn't matter.
Hey, Chris, speaking on those terms, just from your experience, from those organizations who have actually done TTXs or maybe even involved you as incident response, do you see a difference in their response, or can you notice the difference between those who actually have a well-tested plan versus those who just have checked the box?
So I really enjoy doing tabletops, and what we're talking about here is that, hey, this company has a maturity and they've got an IR plan and they want to test it out. So they'll have us come in and do a tabletop exercise, and I will create some artifacts. Our team is really skilled at doing that. But yeah, so those conversations, Brian, are really eye-opening for the folks, not just the technical folks, but also the leadership, because they didn't know all the things they didn't know, and they didn't know all the holes and gaps that we were going to find, right? Like out-of-band communication and things like that. So the folks who test it and test the plan always come out better on the end if they have these things. That's, again, on the maturity level, but the more mature an organization is, the more likely they are to be doing that. But yeah, I think that's money really well spent. If you don't have an IR plan, get an IR plan first, right? We got to have a plan to change a plan. But the next thing is to exercise it, right? We got to make sure that we've identified all the things that are problematic. But yeah, I'm a big fan of those things. And they're a lot of fun. We get in and kind of mix it up with the technical folks and the leadership.
So I have a question. It sounds like that the insurance companies are not as active as they used to be, where it's kind of like they were like the auto insurance. They want to control the cost. So we'll get the appraiser, we'll give you to a certain shop, we'll make sure that everything is, the tow truck, they want to control the costs. But you keep mentioning like a negotiator, which is a third party thing, the people who get the Bitcoin, maybe a third party thing, and that the insurance company is just kind of like the one that makes sure it's sanctioned, that they'll pay it, as you say. Is that a fair statement now?
Yeah, so it depends. It depends on the carrier, and it depends on the coverage level that you have. So we've had to go to some carriers, and we may not be on their approved list, but they're one of our ACE clients, our star clients, and we're like, hey, we want to be their IR firm of choice. The client will go to bat for us and say, hey, we want Fortalice to be able to provide these services, and they pre-negotiate that. So it really depends. Some of the, I won't call them lower carriers. I don't know. It just depends on the insurance company that you have, but some of them very much want to control that, to your point, right? They only will tell you to work with this company, and they will only pay X dollars, and they've got these pre-negotiated rates. So it really depends.
And can you explain also, when you said, you'd mentioned initially then the Bitcoin, there was a 3% transaction fee, which I was under the impression that was what like the negotiator or whoever would do it would charge them. But you said that the negotiators charge like 3 to 10K, or am I talking about two different entities here?
You're absolutely right. So the negotiator charges the flat fee up front to $3,000 to $10,000, and that's no matter what, that's what they're going to get out of it. So when you transfer the money to the negotiator, they want another 3% on top of that to transfer that over to the bad actor. That's on top of it.
And how do they get that money? So that, obviously, sometimes it could be a big wire transfer, and getting CFOs to sign off and things like that. I was involved many years ago with these things, and like we literally met a call girl in Washington D.C. streets and got $100,000 of Bitcoin from her. But in this case, it's like, okay, you have this negotiator, which is a little bit better, and that you are banks got a wire to this company to then like get the Bitcoin. And then I'm sure they do this all the time. So they have, reputable sites where they get it, or maybe they distribute it to multiple ones to make sure it's not like one lump sum. So they can be, attribution comes back to them that they made this one transaction. I guess they handle all that, right?
Yeah, so they do. So yes, typically wire is how we've done that. We've seen it go via credit card, depending on how many Bitcoin it is and how large your credit card limit is. But yeah, typically we see that done by a wire, by the CFO. CFO is typically the one that goes through the OFAC check as well. So it's, again, the licensing I told you guys about earlier. That was a CFO at a company. He's wiring money for Bitcoin, and he's got to go through this OFAC check as well. So yes, that typically comes by a wire to the Bitcoin exchange, then from there to the wallet of the negotiator. As far as distribution,
so the company's buying the Bitcoin and they're giving it to the negotiator.
Correct. Yeah, the negotiator.
Oh, okay. I thought it was they were giving the money to the negotiator and the negotiator acquires the Bitcoin.
No, so they have to have the bit. You send the Bitcoin to the negotiator, the
Oh.
negotiator sends that on. So yeah, they expect that to be all done. You can't just send them a wire of 50K or something. That's not how that works.
I mean,
The ones
that's a delicate process of buying the Bitcoin that, it doesn't want, you don't want that to be your first rodeo.
Yeah.
Because you can go to some, irreputable exchange. So like, oh, this one looks legitimate. And then you're out, and again, going back to, and then from an attribution standpoint, because it's all in the ledger somewhere, do these negotiators who actually, so the negotiator does the actual transfer to the adversary, and the company will get Bitcoin and send it to that negotiator who then kind of transfers it there. So, what are we looking at is there a best practice from an attribution standpoint to, like I said before, buy it from multiple different places so it's spread out so no one sees this one, oh, someone paid, $3 million in Bitcoin all at once. We know what that was because we saw this in the news.
Yeah, so that's a strategy you could employ. I've not seen folks do that. Typically, folks who are paying the ransom are just, let me get in and do it as fast as I can, right? So that's typically what we.
Well, I guess as you going back to what you said, 70% of them are like companies less than 1,000 people. So
yeah,
it's like the bread and butter. I work for a very big company, so it would be something that we would be very concerned about.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And for our more mature clients, we're telling them to have Bitcoin accounts set up already, just proactively, right? So they've got an IR plan, they're going through tabletops and things like that. One of our recommendations is have a Bitcoin account already. Maybe you don't have a ton of Bitcoin in it, but at least have that worked through so you can go through this much quicker.
Should they also have like a negotiator picked out as well? Like all of that kind of done ahead of time?
Not necessarily. I think that the negotiators' statistics change so rapidly. So we looked at one for this snatch. We looked at 3 different negotiators, and we picked the one that had the best statistics, both reduction in price as well as getting data back. So you could have that pre-negotiated if you want, but you don't really get a discount. And in my mind, I'm not sure that you'd want to be necessarily in bed with one or the other until it's time for that to be the thing. So
how do you find them? Is there like a Google search for, CNET rates the best negotiators?
Now you look at Capterra, man. That's what Capterra tells us all the things. No, so yeah, that's a bit of a challenge. And I will tell you, Coveware is kind of the behemoth. They're the lion. They actually have a partner network as well. So they will actually process ransomware negotiations for other folks who they call their partners. So even if they won't take on your case, they may say, hey, we're too busy right now, go here. But yeah, word of mouth is how to do it. So usually your IR firm will have someone they worked with in the past, and they kind of go from there. But we don't necessarily suggest folks do the ransomware negotiation. So we didn't have a stable of that not that long ago. So we went through this whole process of identifying 4 or 5 folks that we knew that we could trust. We got a lot of information on them, and then we can present to our client, hey, here are the 3 or 4 that we know of. But yeah, just Googling for it's not going to do you a whole lot of good. You got to get word of mouth. Again, you got to talk to someone who's in the IR space. Other questions that you guys have?
How mature have the insurance companies been in your perspective, like in terms of understanding, InfoSec and all the different aspects of it and how to, sell the products to the customers?
Yeah, they're a lot better than they were. I can tell you that, right? This is a huge issue that they're putting a lot more resources at. Ones that are more kind of the behemoths or Beasley and some of the others, right? Those are the ones who understand the negotiations and then things like that. They're also sometimes the one who want to control it, almost like a State Farm, car insurance type scenarios. So yeah, a lot of them are a lot better than what they were before. It was like, oh yeah, we're going to sell some cyber stuff and hope it never pays off. Now they're giving discounts based on maturity, right? So they may take a NIST model or a CIS model and figure out, this customer should be eligible for this type of rate. But yeah, they've gotten a much better on a maturity scale. They've had to, right? It didn't take too many times them paying out money that they weren't expecting to for them to not to put a process around it and get some actuaries involved.
Really good.
Other questions, guys? You can tell I get spun up, man. I like talking about this stuff, and I love it, helping customers, but I get spun up because it's so much information I want to give you. So I really appreciate your time for sure. Would love to chat some more. If you guys need something, that's a personal cell number. You can shoot me a text or give me a call or something. I'm glad to hop on and we'll have a conversation. You can email me there. Matt's of course got all my contact information as well. So we'd love to help you, hopefully in a proactive manner. Hopefully we can come in and do some security engineering or something for you. But if you do have a problem with an incident, we'll glad to help you there as well. Matt, how'd I do, man? Did I get right on the time and everything?
Give you a good grade. I think you did a great job. No, it's a complex topic. This could be several different meetings to talk about all these different types of discussions within the greater discussion. So you did a fantastic job. Thanks for coming, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Hey guys, just real quick before I'm going to turn it over to Sean to wrap it up, but we will have the recording available for you all to distribute or access if you'd like to see it again and take some information from this session. It should be wrapped up probably by Monday. Give us a couple days to do some editing and everything, and edit half of what Chris set out, and we'll be good for production and distribution at that point. That'll be great. Thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, Chris and Bridget, thank you guys again for taking time out of your busy schedules to give us a great presentation, some great information. Definitely appreciate you guys taking time to join us, and hopefully we'll get a chance again to have you or someone else from your team bring us another informative topic. So just want to thank you guys again, and thanks to everybody else for joining us tonight. We're looking forward to another great chapter meeting, and I'll be sending out some information as to where we are in the process, as I mentioned, as far as the charter, and after I have the conversation with Paula, just to make sure that we're on track and we can officially get our charter and continue to build a great community here. So thank you all for joining us this evening, and everyone, y'all have a good night.
See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Guys.